My name is Sriram Krishnaswamy. I'm at the University of Pennsylvania, and I'm doing this eulogy for Paul Bajaj because I've been friends with him since 1984. I've been a colleague. We've shared common scientific interests as well. Paul Bajaj passed away in July 2022 at the age of 78. At the time, he was a professor at UCLA. So what I'd like to do first is start off by giving a short synopsis of Paul's career trajectory, highlighting his important contributions to the field. And he arrived here in the United States from India in 1970 and had chosen to pursue a graduate program or Ph.D. program in biochemistry. And he chose to do this at the University of Minnesota and ended up in the laboratory of Kenneth Mann, an important player in the ISTH at the time, certainly. His work involved the purification of the vitamin K proteins of coagulation, which was a major endeavor at that time. When he finished his PhD, either 1974 or 1975, Paul Bajaj went on to do a postdoctoral fellowship with Frank Castellino at Notre Dame. Some of you, or all of you, might recognize that Frank Castellino has been an important player in a variety of fields related to hemostasis, but at the time he was a major player in the fibrinolysis field. And Paul Bajaj then worked on plasminogen activation, and his early work involved studies showing that the protein streptokinase, the bacterial protein, could activate plasminogen in a stoichiometric way. And we now know that this is because streptokinase binds plasminogen and conformationally activates it so it can convert more plasminogen to plasmin. Following his postdoctoral work, he did a short stint in the pharmaceutical industry, and then he joined Sam Rappaport's lab at UCSD. And Sam Rappaport is also has been an important player in the ISTH. In Sam's lab, he worked on the extrinsic pathway of coagulation, the functions of 7A and tissue factor, and mostly worked on both the ability of 7A and tissue factor to activate 9 and factor 10. But he was involved in these seminal studies that showed that there was a component of the lipoproteins in plasma that could regulate or inhibit 7A tissue factor function in a 10A dependent manner. Of course, now we recognize this protein or this component to be tissue factor pathway inhibitor, an important regulator of coagulation. In 1985, he moved from Sam Rappaport's lab to start his own laboratory at St. Louis University, where he continued to work on structure function studies of factor 9 and factor 10, employing mutagenesis and functional type studies. And one of the highlights of this period was that he was the first to identify a helix in the protease domain of factor 9A, which he referred to as the 160 or 162 helix, that was important for factor 8A binding. And this has become a consistent theme for the other protease cofactor complexes, where there is a significant role for this comparable helix in binding the cofactor. Somewhere along the way, I'm not sure exactly the year, but he took a sabbatical leave to work with Al Tolinsky at Michigan State University. And you might recognize Al Tolinsky as a major player in the initial structural biology advances in the coagulation field. And in this time, Paul Bajaj became enthralled with X-ray crystallography and the kinds of information it could provide. And his further work developed a very strong structural flavor. Throughout, despite his significant and important contributions to the field, Paul Bajaj was a very humble man, and he was committed to excellence in science. And I think this partly reflects, or largely maybe reflects, his training in classical biochemistry throughout the years, which really instilled the ethos of hard work and viewing science, particularly his own, with a very critical eye. I know that he was always scientifically demanding of himself and the people in his laboratory. So as I mentioned earlier, Paul, and I'm doing this because Paul and I have been friends since we first met in 1984. And this friendship was partly because we had shared scientific interests. But we also had a common bond of having trained with Ken Mann. Paul, because he was very serious about his work, was mostly always business. Although in more recent years, as we both had grown older, we tried to make time when we met at meetings or at NI study sections to have a little fun and maybe just talk about our personal lives. Paul is remembered as a serious scientist. He was committed to excellence in his own science and in the work from his laboratory. And he was a hard taskmaster for everybody and very critical with respect to his evaluation of science. I think he'll be missed by the field, the ISTH community, his colleagues, and also his friends.